Eat human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
C'est tu apogeo.
ピーク人間
Hello, we're back. I'm Brian Sanders, and I'm excited to share another great episode with you lovely people. Dr. Ken Berry is author of the great book, Lies My Doctor Told Me. He's a speaker, he's got an awesome and very popular YouTube channel, and he's a great doctor who realized he was doing everything wrong and had the humbleness to admit this was so and reversed course. His own health was failing him, and the advice he was giving his patients was failing them as well. I love these people who can man up to their mistakes, admit they didn't have all the answers, and work tirelessly to make up for it. He's got a bunch of great takeaways to offer, so listen up to the good doctor. Now I've got a few updates. We just started an impromptu project, a mini doc debunking the latest installment of vegan propaganda called The Game Changers. If you haven't heard of this, it's a quote documentary on Netflix about a few athletes who eat only plants and think everyone in the world should do the same thing. They misrepresent science and purposely deceive a huge population in the world who is not well versed on food and nutrition and might believe that because a few genetic freaks are doing mildly well eating a few salads, and James Cameron, who has $140 million invested in pea protein, which they make the fake Impossible burgers out of, say that this is how humans should eat, that it is actually true. I could go on and on about this, but I won't, because this short film will say it all much better. We got a great team together on short notice, including Sean Baker, Paul Saladino, Mark Sisson, and Tim Sheep, who used to be called the Vegan Prince and was actually in the Game Changers film. That's until he realized the diet was destroying his life and he moved to embrace animal foods and basically immediately restored his health. We're filming some comedy reenactments of some of the stupid so-called experiments they do in the film tomorrow with some of these guys. We're going to be releasing this on YouTube for the whole world to see for free on November 27th, the night before Thanksgiving. So many people were falling for this propaganda piece, we had to make this and get it out quick. Just in time to show your family members who may be refusing that turkey because they saw this unscientific joke. This is not going to delay the Food Lies film, which is still my main focus. You can learn more about that if you haven't heard of it yet at foodlies.org. I have a different team working on that and it's moving full steam ahead, so don't worry. Nosetotail.org is also going strong. We deliver sustainably raised grass-fed, grass-finished meat to your door. It's similar to other meat delivery services, but we use the entire animal, and it's from our family-owned ranch in Texas. Get the bones, marrow, fat, organs, and everything else at nosetotail.org. I'm liking the beef bacon these days. It's kind of like your best guy friend and best girlfriend getting married. It's a beautiful thing. That's about it for now. So much going on daily here at Sapien, it's hard for me to not go on and on about it. You can learn more at sapien.org. So now, I'll let y'all hear from my main man, Dr. Ken Berry. All right, Dr. Ken Berry here. How's it going? Where are you calling in from?
Great. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
I love it. I've been there once.
You should come back. It's fun.
All right. Well, yeah. I want to start off with a tweet, actually. I don't know if this was a joke or what, but I've had Dr. Tro on the podcast. He's great. Love what he's doing over there in New York. And yeah. I don't know if you guys were just fake, joking around a little bit, but you had a great tweet. It says, don't take nutrition advice from a fat doctor, right? And you used to be a bit overweight, and Dr. Tro used to be, I guess you would say, obese. So he just took didn't take that too kindly, but was he joking?
Oh, I'm not sure if he was joking or not. Typically, I use Twitter as a method to put thoughts out into the universe, and I very seldom engage in Twitter slap fights or back and forth. I don't really, because you can wind up wasting hours of your day when you could be making video or helping, reverse someone's diabetes. And so I don't typically get into the back and forth. I think that my tweet was fairly straightforward. I think a lot of people read a lot of things into the tweet that weren't in the tweet. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who got really triggered by the tweet don't know my backstory. And so they think that I'm some slender guy who's always been metabolically advantaged and, just was being an asshole to people who have a weight problem. And that's obviously not what I was doing at all. It's my mission in life to reverse epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes in the world. That's what I do. That's why I get up every day. So to say that I was shaming someone because of their body size or marginalizing them or making fun of them or trying to hurt their feelings is fanciful. It's just silliness. But a lot of people, they heard what they heard instead of what I actually said.
Well, that happens online with everything. That happens to me a lot with anything I say. Some people somehow twist it around. But it's almost even motivational at times too, right? You're not demeaning anyone. It's like, hey, if I say like don't eat all the time, you're not a little kid. I'm not saying, food addiction problems it should be making fun of. I'm being motivating.
Exactly. Just on Instagram, I said one time, don't reward yourself with treats. You're not a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward to me, right? You don't need treats all the time. That shouldn't be your primary motivation. And most people understood what I meant by that, but there were a few who got very butthurt by that and unfollowed me and blocked me and reported me. And I think, on any social media, you're going to get that. If let's say, for example, someone who doesn't know me got triggered by that and got emotionally very upset by that, I think that's still in the long term a good thing because it made them think about that. It made them formulate a response. It made them tell me off on Twitter, which generated more engagement on the tweet. And so I think all in all, even if I lost a few followers or even if I really hurt somebody's feelings, I think in the bigger picture, in the long term, it probably was a net positive for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Well, so then tell us your backstory a bit more. It's like, why can you say, don't trust a fat doctor?
About 7, 8, 9 years ago, when I first started my medical practice 15 years ago, I was a morbidly obese, pre-diabetic, severely inflamed family physician. And I've been board certified since I've been in practice. I was trained allopathically in modern medicine. I was not a naturopath. And so I was trained as far as nutrition goes to eat lots of whole grains, avoid saturated fat, and jog. That was really the summation of my nutrition education. And when I started gaining weight and became overweight, then obese, and then ultimately morbidly obese by the BMI criteria, I was doing that. And so that's really was my epiphany that, hey, maybe the nutrition advice that I was taught in medical school that I've been giving to patients, maybe that was not true. Maybe that was a big fat lie. Maybe I've actually not been helping my patients at all. Maybe I've been harming them by giving idiotic nutrition advice. And so that's kind of what started me on this journey. And in the process of this journey, I've reversed my morbid obesity. I've reversed my pre-diabetes and multiple other problems with chronic disease and chronic inflammation. And so I've kind of made it my mission to help other people understand that you've been given ignorant, improper, incorrect nutrition advice. And so there are all these millions of people out there, Brian, who are busy recording their calories and their calories in, their calories out. They're busy, doing all these things, joining the gym. And in reality, none of that stuff's going to help you lose fat, which is the ultimate goal, is to get your body fat percentage back down to where it should be to have optimal health. None of that stuff really helps you. It's busy work. And so you can be very busy and just have charts and Excel spreadsheets and, be spending hundreds of dollars a month on this, that, or the other, organic, non-GMO, join the gym. And it's not helping you at all. And so you're really, what degree of motivation you had and what degree of just kind of mental effort and grit you've had, you're spending it all on stuff that doesn't help you at all.
That's a huge one. I was just talking about with Dr. Ben Bickman about these gigantic people in the gym trying to do like little curls. And I didn't want to disrupt their life and just come in and start talking to them. But I really wanted to give that message that you just told us. So, oh man, a lot of people, I've seen people lose half their body weight and they said they didn't work out at all. They started later.
Right. Now, I had two paraplegics in my practice. One had been in a car accident, another in a hunting accident, and were paralyzed from the, kind of the mid chest, upper abdomen down. And so joining the gym and doing squats and leg, extensions, that was out of the question. And both of these guys used a very low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet, and they both reversed their morbid obesity, sitting in a wheelchair. And so they were probably more active as they lost the fat just because they felt better. They weren't as inflamed. So they felt like actually being more active. But as far as joining the gym, they didn't do that. They couldn't do that. Well, they could, but their array of exercise possibilities would have been severely. And there are gurus out there who say if you can't squat and deadlift, you might as well forget it. You're not going to lose weight. It's just like, what are you talking about? All about the carbohydrates and your total carbohydrate intake every day. And so, we can go down several different pathways from there, just whichever way you think will help your listeners.
Well, yeah. For one, I love that you have a limited amount of capacity for this or amount of effort. So that's a huge point. But yeah, a lot of people listening, know about the carbohydrates really all that matters in a way. I feel like some people outside, it's like the low carb zealot people. But when it comes down to it, that's just what it is. If you just want to be simple about it, it's like 90% is just what you eat. And then of what you eat, that's what matters.
It's all about, 90% of the battle is what you eat, not when, not how much, none of that. What do you eat? That's 90% of the battle. And then 90% of that 90% is cut your damn carbohydrates as low as you can tolerate until the fat loss begins. Because you have to remember, we all use this term weight loss. But in reality, what we mean by that is fat loss. Nobody, who wants to lose muscle? Not me. Who wants to lose bone density? Who wants to lose brain tissue or liver tissue? Nobody. We want to lose fat. The fat in our belly, we want to lose first because it's the most dangerous. Then the fat on our ass, the fat on our thighs, the fat outside our belly, that's what we want to lose. We want to lose fat. And in order to do that, cut your carbohydrates as low as you can get by with if you want to lose that fat as quickly as possible. That's just the end of it. And so why would I be giving people all this busy work that squanders their motivation? And, we're busy people. We only have so many minutes a day. We don't have hours and hours a day. We don't have the finances to afford a personal trainer and afford a 24-hour-a-day gym membership and all of this grass-fed, grass-finished Panda massage, $22 a pound ribeye. Nobody can do that, right? And so why do we waste people's time telling them this stupid shit? And then secondly, why do we waste their time and their resources basically giving them busy work? Oh, drink 2 gallons of water a day. Really? Where's the research for that? You're giving somebody busy work that doesn't do anything to help them achieve their goal, which is meaningful, sustainable fat loss.
I love that. Yeah, I never really thought about just the distractions, and it's like just focus on one thing. And yeah, I'm going to focus more on this. I have so many kind of like theories and different ways to explain things. I see patients too as a health coach in my doctor partner's clinic. So I kind of do this type of stuff. But just get the busy work out of the way. So go back to that tweet. So as a doctor, so what happens there where many doctors are trying to give advice and they're not healthy themselves?
Right. So I used to be that doctor, and that's why I feel like I have a right and a privilege to talk about fat doctors, because I was one for several years. And so it's not like I'm this slender guy who's had an 8-pack his entire life making fun of fat people. That's not what that tweet was about at all. I remember very well the nutrition advice I gave back when I was a morbidly obese doctor, and it was atrocious. It was embarrassing. I would literally tell people, join Weight Watchers, join the gym. This is easy. All you have to do is eat less, move more, burn more than you eat. Duh. It's simple. Second law of thermodynamics, right? And so I would give patients that exact spiel, and then they would go off. They'd come back 6 months later, and they'd gain 3 or 4 more pounds. There's this thing doctors do. We believe that all patients are non-compliant. We believe you don't take your medicine right. We believe you don't listen to our nutrition advice. We believe you don't finish your antibiotics. We believe that you don't do any of these things that we tell you to do. And so effectively what that does is it lets doctors off the hook in their own mind, because it's like, I'm sure you were laying on the couch eating Cheetos and Pop-Tarts anyway. You didn't eat less and move more like I told you to. But the reality was they were doing what I told them to, but my advice was ignorant advice. And so not only was I not helping them achieve their goal, which was meaningful fat loss, I was costing them money. And, their blood sugar and their serum insulin levels were staying chronically high from eating all the whole grains and all the fruit and all the vegetables. And so I was actually harming my patients and wasting their money and not helping them at all to achieve the health optimization that they were looking for. And so that's where the tweet came from, is basically a reflection of my own personal experience of being a fat, ignorant doctor. That's where the tweet came from. But then immediately people started saying, so you're saying that an overweight doctor can't give good medical advice? There's this one overweight doctor and he saved my life. And it's like, no. Go back and read the tweet very carefully. I chose each word very carefully to say what I meant for it to say. And so don't be trying to read anything into it. Just read the tweet.
That's a good point. So, I mean, technically someone could be obese and give accurate advice, but then how come they're not doing it?
Right. Then you think, well, is this doctor not practicing good self-care? I mean, what's wrong with this doctor? If this doctor knows about low-carb, keto, carnivore, and they're not practicing it, what's up with that? That's also worrisome, isn't it, Brian? You see my point? And so tweet, I didn't just throw this off the cuff. This was a well-thought-out tweet. And then also let's take because there's really three doctors. Somebody who is, well, there's four. There's the metabolically gifted person who could literally live on Doritos and honey buns and still have a six-pack. There's that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Mean that guy gives good nutrition advice? Obviously not. That's not what the tweet said. It didn't mention that. Secondly, what about the guy who's reversed his type 2 diabetes and obesity with low-carb, keto, carnivore? Yeah, he's going to give you good advice. He's going to say, look, I used to be a fat ass, and I tried hard and nothing worked until I figured out the right thing to do, right? Then there's this third doctor. What if somebody's just started low-carb, keto, carnivore, but they haven't got to their goal weight yet? If you say to that doctor, doctor, I hear you giving me this advice, but I mean, you're a little fluffy, you're a little overweight. So how do I know that you know what you're talking about? Is that doctor going to be offended by that question?
No,
that doctor's going to be happy to tell you, hey, dude, listen, I used to weigh 60 more pounds than I do now. Here's a before picture. That doctor's going to be eager to tell you about their health journey and take you on that journey with them. Does that make sense? So it's only the obese doctor who's still recommending the American Diabetes Association diet who's going to be truly offended in their heart of hearts by this tweet and take personal offense and say, so you're saying I'm not a good doctor? No, I didn't say that. I just said you probably give crap nutrition advice. I stand by the tweet and I stand by my position. And if I really hurt somebody's feelings, I apologize. I didn't intend to hurt anybody's feelings, but I did intend to rattle some cages and make all healthcare providers think, do you look like you should be giving nutrition advice? If you don't look like that, then should you do something about that? You know the proper feeding of the human animal, do you? Are you recommending the American Heart Association diet? Or do you recommend people join Weight Watchers or follow the Biggest Loser diet? All of which have been proven to fail over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, if you said don't trust a fat personal trainer, people would understand that. You know, it's a little more direct. It's like, okay, if your personal trainer is like a twig or an obese, I'm not going to go to them. But when it's a doctor, everyone gets their panties in a bunch. Well, anyway,
really what if I said don't take engine advice from a mechanic whose car won't start?
Yeah.
Right? What if I'd said, don't take beauty advice from a cosmetologist who looks ratchet? You could apply this to all professions, and I think it applies if someone has taken on the persona of a profession. If you're a doctor, you got the white coat and the stethoscope, then you need to step it up. You need to walk the walk, and you need to look like you know what you're talking about. I don't think that's especially triggering. Maybe it is, but I didn't mean for it to be.
Yeah. Here's another tweet. Actually, I wrote this down months ago. I was like, oh, I got to have Ken on. If a doctor remembers the physiology, biochemistry, and cardio and metabolism taught in the first 2 years and forgets all the nutrition indoctrination of the following years, keto/low carb becomes inevitable.
Exactly right. Yeah. If you remember your biochemistry and your human physiology, and you go back and you look at your physiology textbook and you review the gastrointestinal physiology, if you go back and just look at all that and forget everything else you were taught from the third year on about human nutrition, you'll give great nutrition advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But so then what happened? This is like this cognitive dissonance. This was like going on in our whole healthcare system is people understand it and then they get this other advice that conflicts with it. So it's like, oh, you need to eat your whole grains. And they just don't ever realize that they're conflicting or try to reconcile what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Human beings are very good at holding two beliefs. Each belief negates the other belief. Like you believe this and also this. These two things cannot cohabitate. If you were to take that human with these two conflicting beliefs and point out those two conflicting beliefs, very often you'll get an emotional response because they're not really ready to deal with the fact that they believe two things which both can't be true. And so, if you go back and look at your physiology and you look at the Krebs cycle and you look at the Purine cycles and all this stuff, carbs where it's at, there's no doubt. But then you were taught in your nutrition class and for the remainder of your medical education to eat lots of whole grains and to avoid saturated fat and to jog. That's how you lose fat. These doctors are holding two separate things in their brain that don't jive. They don't agree. But yeah, and so when you point that out, sometimes it causes an emotional response. And I hope that close on the heels of that emotional response, we'll have more self-reflection and maybe perhaps going back and reviewing some physiology and some biochemistry. I hope that's what happens.
Well, I think this whole world is exposing that right now, like our low carb or all this different stuff. Yeah, it's getting exposed. So what are some other problems though? I feel like there's so many problems that people don't even know about that's caused by food and that so they're just going along with their diet. It's kind of like the survive or thrive type of thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, like I'm doing fine. I'm a vegetarian, but it's like, well, you have tons of problems. So I think you mentioned like even dandruff as something.
Oh, yeah. Back when I was a fat, ignorant doctor, I had terrible dandruff. I used probably 3 ounces of Head and Shoulders extra strength every single day. I had rosacea that I had to put 1% hydrocortisone cream on at least 2 or 3 times a week to keep it at bay. I had severe heartburn. I mean, heart attack level pain, heartburn. I had chronic joint pain. I was an athlete in high school and for a second in college. And so, I thought, well, I just wore these joints out. That's what it is. And so I chalked it up to that, not realizing that, all human joints regenerate and rejuvenate all the time if you're feeding them the proper human diet. And so I actually believed in, your joints will wear out if you overuse them. There's no truth in that. There's no research that shows that. There's no physiology that backs that up. No matter your age. Now, if you get older, you're going to regenerate slower than someone who's a young child or a teenager, but you still nonetheless do that. You still have stem cells in your joint. You can still grow new joint parts, new cartilage. You can tighten up your meniscus. You can tighten up your tendons and your ligaments. This is known. We know this, but we forget about that because we start buying into these kind of false paradigms. And there are so many doctors walking around with false paradigms that they live their life based on, and that's why they're overweight and unhealthy and type 2 diabetic. And that's kind of the doctor I was reaching out to lovingly around a little bit, get them to wake up and say, dudes, what are you doing? Stop believing this dumb crap. Start thinking with your brain.
That's great. And well, now I'm thinking about, Sean Baker loves to point out all these athletes that are going vegan and having all these problems with injuries and that's a way to not build up your joints and stuff, right?
Exactly right. There are all these different motivations. And so if you're a Roman emperor, you want your subjects to eat grain because they're going to do fine for a few decades. They'll live into their 30s or 40s, right? And if you're an Egyptian pharaoh, you want your people to eat grains and lots of fruit and honey and vegetables and just a little bit of meat, not much, because it's cheap to feed people that way. It's cheap to feed thousands or millions or billions of people with a grain-based diet, and they'll live pretty healthy until they're 30, 40, 50, 60. Then they'll start to fall apart. And so that gives us this illusion that, maybe that's. And so, is Eat Lancet, are they really concerned with me being an active, vigorous, muscular 50 or 60 or 70 or 80-year-old and playing in the yard with my great grandchildren? Is that their motivation? Or is their motivation perhaps to feed as many billion people as cheaply as possible and let them get to an age where they can reproduce and have a few, years of maybe being a grandparent, maybe, and then die pretty quickly so that we don't have to fool with them anymore. You have to start considering that. Currently digging deep into Egyptian archaeology and anthropology because Dr. Michael Eads, a great voice in the local carnivore community, he's got a lecture where he talks about the Egyptian mummies have terrible atherosclerosis. All their arteries are clogged up when you scan them or autopsy them. And so everybody immediately says, well, only the elite were mummified, right? And so they could afford to eat all the meat. Well, actually, no, none of that's true. So everybody in Egyptian society, unless they were homeless and had no family, got some degree of mummification. There were 3 different levels. There was the most expensive, there was the moderate, and there was the cheapest, kind of like at the modern funeral home. You could, if you can afford it, you buy the mahogany casket with the gold fringe, right? If you can't, you wind up with a pine box. But nonetheless, we all get a coffin, right? Same goes for the Egyptian society. And so the wealthiest, even the wealthiest of that society, ate a plant-based diet. They would have a little meat from time to time, but the majority of their energy intake was grains and fruits and vegetables, and they loved honey. Now, also, they didn't have processed sugar. They had no source of just sugar like we have today. So the Egyptian diet is exactly the diet that we are all being told to eat today. But you can go back and you can do a CAT scan on a 30-year-old Egyptian mummy. They have terrible teeth. They've had multiple dental infections, and they also have terrible coronary artery disease, and they have blockages in all the arteries of their body, even in their 30s and 40s, and by 50, they're done. And so we have to stop and go, wait a minute, do I want to have atherosclerosis in my 30s, 40s, and 50s? If I do, then I should eat the Egyptian diet, which was a grain-based, lots of fruits and vegetables they would eat. And then if they did eat meat, they would eat fish or poultry, right? Very rarely did they eat red meat because they used cows and oxen and stuff like that to do the beast of burden work, right? They would put a yoke on them and they would drag stuff with it like blocks to the pyramid or whatever. But if they ate meat, it was poultry or fish. Usually they ate bread. Bread every meal. They ate vegetables. They ate lentils. They ate exactly the diet that Eat Lancet and the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association is telling us to eat. I have a problem with that. I have a problem that we have this archaeological evidence and we're ignoring that and telling people, oh, no, you need to eat a plant-based diet for longevity and optimal health. That's bullshit. There's no research that shows that to be true whatsoever. And there's copious amounts of anthropological data and archaeological research that shows that's completely untrue.
Yeah. And people think that the DASH diet or the ADA diet is like purely based on like great science, right?
Yeah. There was one study that was done that shows maybe a 3 or 4 point decrease in your blood pressure from eating the DASH diet. The problem with that is that you're going to have chronically elevated glucose, insulin, and cortisol levels because it's also a low salt diet. And when you cut a human salt, their levels of cortisol elevate. So is it possible that chronically elevated levels of glucose, insulin, and cortisol, is that more of a risk factor for heart disease than having a blood pressure that's 2 or 3 points higher? Yes, definitely. And so even the DASH diet, when you start breaking it down and looking at it, the research that supports it is idiotic. It doesn't show any meaningful benefit at all from eating the diet, but yet that's the diet you recommended from every ivory tower in every academic institution in the world currently.
Well, none of those, we don't have great data on any diet, but actually we have the most good science on keto diets because that's actually been studied more, but yet those are the ones most maligned.
Absolutely. And so if you're looking for positive data, like I need data that shows that this diet is good, there's actually a lot of research on a low-carb keto diet. If you're looking for negative evidence, show me some evidence that this diet is bad, then go back and look at the scans on the Egyptian mummies who range from upper class to middle class to even lower class. They all ate a grain heavy plant-based diet, and they all have severe atherosclerosis, even at a very young age. Their atherosclerosis is actually worse than modern Americans in some instances. So we actually have copious amounts of negative data that show that you should not eat a grain-heavy plant-based diet if, that is, you want to live to be an old, healthy, vigorous, muscular, great-grandparent who's kicking the soccer ball around in the yard with their great-grandparents.
Yeah, do you want to be Mark Sisson or do you want to be like
Right.
Dr. So
Exactly.
I love that. And all they have is epidemiology too, right? It's all these plant-based diets. It's just, oh, well, there's associated. Well, I've gone into this before. People know how bad epidemiology is and all the healthy user bias type stuff by now. But so I love it that you have this, you say fatty meat keto. It's like one word, fatty meat keto. It's like the opposite of the Egyptian diet. It's the exact opposite is fatty meat keto, which is red meat, fatty meat, and little else. And I feel like we're really on the same page here. I'm talking about this sapien, right? It's like a sapien diet. It's basically we're all kind of talking about the same thing, right? It's like it all makes sense. It all lines up, evolutionarily lines up with modern science, with everything. So, yeah, what is your ideal diet?
So my ideal diet is the diet that we've been eating for the majority of the time that we have been a species on this planet. You call it the sapien diet. That's a beautiful way to describe it. I call it the proper human diet.
Mhm.
I think basically means exactly the same thing. We've been on this planet as Homo sapiens sapiens for somewhere between 250,000 to 300,000 years, right? We've been on this planet as a genus Homo for over a million, maybe 2 million, 2.5 million years. And people think, oh, we can't know what they ate back then. We can't know that, right? Actually, that's completely untrue. We can use carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and strontium stable isotope analysis, right? We can go back and look at the bones of somebody who died a year ago or who died 100,000 years ago, and we can tell how much seafood what percentage seafood made up or aquatic protein, how much of their diet that made up. We can tell how much red meat. We can even tell which types of red meat they ate. We can tell what percentage of their diet was plant versus animal sourced. This is known in anthropology. And so when you've got the average doctor who's got his medical blinders on and he just stays in his little box and he looks at what the American Heart Association says, he doesn't know any of this, right? He doesn't know any of this. But when you take the blinders off that doctor and say, it's probably important what we've eaten for 99.99999% of our time on this planet, that probably matters. That may even be the proper human diet or the sapien diet. We should probably go back and see if we can figure out what that was. And when you do take that intellectual journey, you find out, lo and behold, we do know what we ate 50,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago. It was only about 12 to 15,000 years ago that we started eating on purpose, eating a plant-based, grain-heavy diet. Before then, we never did that. Now, if we were starving, would we eat some veg or some grass seeds? Hell yes, we would, because eating cow shit's better than starving to death, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're starving, we're going to eat anything. There's documentation of people boiling their shoe leather during famines and eating their shoes. Yeah, we'll eat anything if we have to keep from dying. What is it that we reach for first if we could get it? What did we go out of our way and risk our life to eat? That probably matters. That's probably important. And I think my proper human diet and your sapien diet talk about eating a lot of fatty meat because that's what we did if we had our choice.
It's so simple and it's so satisfying. I'm about to do a post where it's like pleasure, health, evolution. Who would have thought they'd all line up and there's stakes on each one, right? It's like humans know what to eat. Babies know what to eat. So so down to the minutia of it, like I guess there's no one size fits all, like the classic phrase goes, but how do you kind of like tune it in to different people and your patients? And then how did you tune it in for yourself?
So when I talk about the proper human diet, what I mean by that is there's a spectrum. I don't think there's just one exact diet for everybody. I think some people do pretty darn good on an ovo-lacto vegetarian keto, where they get, they eat lots of cold water fish and they eat eggs and then they eat a lot of veg. I think, and as long as they're avoiding the grains and avoiding the sugar and avoiding the industrial seed oils, for some people, I think that's a pretty darn healthy, proper human diet. For other people like me who are very, very insulin resistant, my diet has to be as close to 0 grams of total carbohydrates a day as I can get it. And so yesterday, I ate 2 big, fatty ribeye steaks and half a pound of beef liver with some spices and a little bit of 0 carb mustard. That was my diet yesterday. And that's my diet many days of the week. Every now and then I'll grab one of my wife Nisha's Brussels sprouts, just out of boredom or out of, I don't know. I really love those as much as I once thought I did. And I'll take a bite. For a while, I had a lot of full-fat real cheese in my diet. Recently, I did a month of no cheese, no heavy cream. The only dairy I included in my diet was butter and ghee. I lost 6 pounds and felt even better. And so now my proper human diet for me is fatty meat, red meat, carnivore, with some butter and with some spices, lots of salt because all humans need salt, need real salt. And that's it. That's my diet. And I feel so amazing on this diet. And I'm going to be 51 years old soon. And I feel better now at 50 far better, not just a little better, Brian, but way better than I felt when I was 35. And I think any diet that's sustainable and delicious and can let you say a statement like that out loud and mean it, that's a powerful diet, right? And so at one point in my journey, I thought that a vegetable-heavy keto with some fatty meat, I thought that was probably the best diet just because I still had that false paradigm in my head that we should eat lots of plants, dark leafy greens and stuff. But as I've come down this road with all the people who are coming with me, I don't develop any vitamin or mineral deficiencies or fatigue or anything if I just leave the vegetables off. Now, is that appropriate for everybody? Maybe. But I think somewhere along the spectrum of the proper human diet is where every human being on the planet, if you are Homo sapien sapien, you should eat somewhere on that spectrum.
Yeah, that's It's basically the Sapien Framework. I didn't know you had all these same exact views. I've been kind of developing for a couple of years. It's that there's a spectrum, and you can be on either side of the spectrum. So you are on the top side, right? It's a carnivore. It's included in the Sapien Framework. Yes, this is the far end, and then the bottom end. Yes, you're right. Is the fish and the maybe eggs, vegetable based, but you're still avoiding the sugars, grains, and veg oils. I have this diagram actually on sapien.org. People can check out too, sapien.org/diet, which is, I'm just kind of break this down. And then I add in some more components to it about meal timing, which I think happens naturally, right? You don't need to focus on it. It's like if you're eating fatty meat, you're not hungry.
And a lot of people will consciously, actively try to put some intermittent fasting into their keto, low-carb, carnivore regimen. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's fine because I know that you're going to receive health benefits if you fast.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to start with that. That's going to come naturally. As you start to feed your human body the proper human diet, then things start to matter again, like your hunger stops tricking you. Because when you're eating the standard American garbage, you can mistake boredom for hunger, you can mistake thirst for hunger, you can mistake just being pissed off for hunger, you can mistake being down in the dumps for all these things can trick you into thinking you're hungry. But when you're eating the proper human diet and have been doing so for months, only if you eat some crap that's not on the diet are you going to trigger those false hunger signals. And so, I go for hours every day. I don't even give food a thought. I don't think about food. And for a while there, Nisha is pregnant. She's 9 months pregnant. She's eating pretty much 3 times a day. She's miserable. She's heavy with child. And so she uses food to soothe a little bit and to comfort a little bit. And I'm not going to yell at her about that. I ain't crazy, right? And so there was a time when I couldn't sit down and hurry breakfast and me drink some coffee or something. I couldn't do that. I would go ahead and eat some bacon and eggs. But it's gotten to the point now where if I'm not hungry, I am happy to sit and have a conversation with my family and bond and be present and sip on my salty coffee plus or minus some butter. I'm not hungry. I'm not going to eat. And I think that is that's when you rediscover what true hunger is after you fasted for a few days and oh man, this is what it feels like to be hungry. But those other things that I used to think were hunger, they're not hunger. That's something else I should have been dealing with. And now that I've dealt with that, I don't misconstrue that as hunger anymore. So I think fasting is very important and it's vital. I think it's very ancestrally appropriate. We've done it for millions of years. A million years ago, fasting would have been called starving because you couldn't find any food. And so we now choose to do it until we get used to it again. And then it's just effortless and you don't even think about it. It just happens.
Yeah, and all kinds of religion, all of religions incorporated it in on purpose as well. It's
Every
very
single
natural.
major religion, without exception, had fasting in it. Now, it's kind of fallen by the wayside in modern Christianity, but even Christianity, several hundred years ago, fasting was and I mean significant fasting, not giving up maple syrup for Lent. I'm not talking about giving up games. I'm talking about fasting was a huge part of Christianity several hundred years ago. It was part of every major religion. And, people can get into the religious part of it, and that's fine. But I think they did that because they realized you're healthier when you have periods of fasting.
Yeah, and then so like a practical level with your patients, I love this approach. I try to use it too, but hey, I'm not a doctor. But that you don't even try to introduce it for the first month, or it's like,
Yeah. And so what I really focus on with patients is let's eliminate bad things.
mm,
Because if you think about it, basically we're looking at the elephant from a different angle. And so instead of telling them to add all these things, I say, okay, this month we're going to eliminate all sources of sugar from your diet. And we're going to eliminate all grains from your diet. And we're going to eliminate all industrial seed oils from your diet. And I figure your listeners probably know what I mean by industrial seed oil. We're just going to eliminate those things. And I want you to just kind of, if you're hungry, then eat fatty meat, eat some dark green veg, eat some eggs, eat some butter. And so I don't really focus too much on what to add. I just say, let's subtract these things. And then if you're hungry, fill your fridge and your pantry with real food. If you're hungry, eat that real food. For 85 to 90% of people, just removing those three slow poisons, and that's what I have come to believe they are. They are slow poisons. They're not strychnine. They won't kill you today or next week, but they will cause meaningful amounts of microscopic damage to every organ of your body, and that damage builds up. So when they remove those three slow poisons and start to add in more ancestrally appropriate fatty meats, eggs, bacon, beef, butter, more seafood, more real food, they immediately start to glean health benefits. Immediately. They start to lose fat, their levels of inflammation start to come down. And when you get that kind of positive feedback from a diet, it makes it very sustainable and very easy. Now, there is this thing that I believe firmly in called carbohydrate addiction, which I think PET scans have shown to be a real thing. If you are a carb addict, just like if you're an alcohol or a drug addict, when you withdraw from that, that is going to suck. There's no way we can make that not suck. Withdrawal from cigarettes, from alcohol, from caffeine, from carbohydrates, all those things suck for 3 to 10 days. Once you get past that, all of the positive benefits that you're getting from this diet immediately outweigh all of the unsustainable arguments that you hear out there because you're like, dude, I feel better, look better than I have in years. Why would I ever go back to eating that slow poison crap?
yeah, I have no problem calling it slow poison. Some people are like, "Oh, we got to be, kind and, balanced with our language." Like, no. Like just the fact that you have withdrawals means that it is a drug. I don't know. I think it should be recognized that someday. S-
Totally agree.
Someday. Yeah,
And
and
it's coming. I think the paradigm is shifting, Brian. I think
mm,
people like you and I and others, there's so many people who are basically shifting the paradigm of nutrition thought. And that's what we're doing is we're changing the paradigm. And it's very difficult to do, whether it's in politics, religion, money, food, it doesn't matter. If somebody's got a paradigm their mother taught them, it's very hard to rip that out of their brain and put the proper paradigm in there. But that's what we're doing slowly but surely.
what about, yeah, so you talked about like the deficiencies that haven't popped up. I'm kind of almost carnivore, I haven't gone all the way. I don't know if I want to. I'm a little scared. It's like, oh, what if I do it and it's great? Then I'm like stuck. I have that mentality. So I don't want to make it seem like it's a bad thing to be stuck. Stuck is a bad word. But how do you think it works where people aren't developing these deficiencies? Because if you look it up on paper, I talked to Chris Masterjohn recently, and he's like this total vitamin and mineral nerd. And he's like, oh, well, the folate and like this and that. So how's it working that people can just be doing carnivore, or even some muscle meat carnivores? You're talking about eating liver, you and Paul and everyone. It's like, oh, nose to tail, obviously way better. I got into this little Twitter thing with some muscle meat carnivore guy. He's just like, you're insane. Why are you can't be talking about, you're going to hurt people by thinking they need to eat something other than muscle meat. He's like, you can eat muscle meat for your whole life and be fine.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, there are people who have been doing it for 1, 2, 3 decades.
Yeah.
And they aren't healthy. And I don't suspect them of dishonesty. I don't think they're sneaking around taking a vitamin C supplement. I believe they're pretty earnest and honest in what they're doing. And so I think in the same way that you can eat kind of the standard American diet for decades and not really develop any vitamin or mineral deficiencies that are obvious, right? I think that in that same respect, you can eat just a muscle meat carnivore diet and do very well for many, many decades, and definitely do better than people eating the standard American plant-based diet. But I personally believe, and I think time will tell, first of all, I think that muscle meat carnivores and nose to tail carnivores, we should be best friends. We should not be having Twitter slap fights, because we're both very, very close to the truth. Why would we not work together? Because whether someone who is eating the standard American diet winds up being a nose to tail carnivore or a muscle meat only carnivore, I'm elated. I'm as happy as I can be, because I know that their risk of chronic disease has been slashed. Why would I want to fuss over that minor detail? But I think we have adequate anthropological evidence that our ancestors ate nose to tail, and not just because they were starving and they had to eat the kidneys and the brain and the bone marrow and everything to keep from starving. I think they did that because they realized they felt better and they functioned better when they ate the brain and the bone marrow and all the organs. I think that's part of a complete, proper human diet. And I don't have any problem with muscle meat carnivores like my friend Sean Baker. He looks amazing. He's going to be 53 soon, and he looks amazing. And so what I like to use the analogy, if I took 2 people, Brian, and locked them in my barn, which recently burned down, so I don't have a barn anymore, but I locked them in my theoretical barn, and one was going to be fed a vegan diet, and they could request any plant-based food from anywhere in the world, from the Nile Valley to the Himalayan peaks. And so we would literally have a jet on standby to fly and get them goji berries from Jamaica, but they couldn't have any supplements. And then I locked another guy in my barn, and he was going to eat just nose to tail carnivore, just nose to tail. And we were going to just beef, nose to tail beef. That's all he can eat. Who will develop a vitamin or mineral, vitamin and or mineral deficiency first? This guy's got a jet on standby. He can have any based food on the planet. He can have the old einkorn wheat, not the GMO wheat. He can have GMO, anything. Who will develop a vitamin or mineral deficiency first?
Yeah, it's obvious.
Without doubt, it's obvious.
It's
you
obvious.
cannot do that diet without taking a handful of supplements, and that should be your answer right there. That is not a proper human diet. The guy who's eating nose to tail beef, he can live in my barn for the rest of his life, and he'll actually probably get smart enough and strong enough he can break out of my barn because he's eating such an optimal diet.
Well, he'll be around until he's like 95. Yeah, he'll outlive you, and he'll just walk out. No, I'm there. I think this the muscle meat thing. There's like Bruce Ames, like this triage theory. It's like you're kind of borrowing minerals from elsewhere. So I think of it more. I have no problem with muscle meat carnivore as a tool. I'm kind of saying these things are tools, right? It's like you have this tool belt, and let's do it for a couple years, maybe. Sean Baker's still in the like 2.5 year mark, but maybe not forever,
Yeah. And I think I love that way of thinking about it. I'm not offended that you think of it as a temporary tool rather than a lifelong way of eating. That doesn't offend me, because what most people will discover is when they use that nose to tail carnivore tool for a couple of years and they feel amazing, then they start adding back in other stuff, they'll quickly have their answer. Should I go back to nose to tail carnivore, or should I stay with, put more plants in my diet? And I'm not offended either way. I just want you to avoid the three classes of slow poisons that we know are not good for any human being.
Absolutely. Well, and also I was talking about muscle meat as more of a tool. I would say nose to tail carnivore I would do that for life. I just don't have that much discipline. I mean, Paul Saladino, he's doing it right. And he does it legit. Like he came over, we were filming and stuff, and he wouldn't eat anything that like nothing that wasn't like perfectly grass fed nose to tail, which is another little topic. I like your stance on this is you're saying you don't need to waste your time and money on this insane, hand massage beef. And even though I have nose to tail, that's my company. I sell grass finished beef, but I'm still not saying you have to buy it or you have to only do this. It's like you got to do what you can afford.
Absolutely. I think grass fed, grass finished, 100% pastured, any animal the meat and the other things that you eat from that animal are going to be 5 to 10% better. I don't argue with that at all. But if you are just a regular guy with a spouse and a dog and 2 kids and a job, and you're literally 2 paychecks away from the bill collector knocking on your door, what option do you have? There's a carnivore guru who's got $22 a pound ribeye that you can buy from his company. I mean, that's offensive to me because I used to be broke as a joke. I was born and raised in a lower class family. I mean, maybe we might have dipped our toe in middle class a little bit, but not much. And so that's not an option. You can't do that. You'll break the bank. You'll lose the house if you try to eat that kind. And so my point is that even the cheapest processed meat you can buy at China Mart, which is a euphemism for all the big box stores, it comes from China, right? That's going to be better for you than eating grains and eating processed crap. So if all you can afford is hot dogs and bologna and mustard, do that because that's going to get you to a better state of health than eating all the grains and all the vegetables that we're told that we should eat.
100%, 100%. Let's do some rapid fire stuff here in the last few minutes. Is you have a million YouTube videos. If anyone doesn't know, Dr. Ken Berry is like the YouTube man. he's got a ton of followers, ton of the great videos out there, and I refer to them too. So here's my first one. I get a lot of this gout talk lately. There's like this alcoholic guy who goes in my hot tub, talks about his gout. There's my friend's dad has gout. Even my first episode of the podcast, this vegan guy was trying to say that going vegan saved his life. So what's going on there?
So this is a silly superstition. It's a medical myth that red meat causes cancer, and they come up with that because of purines in the metabolic breakdown of meat, right? But there's actually no research that shows that eating lots of red meat will increase your risk or severity of gout attack. It doesn't exist. And so when I was doing research for my gout video, I found this old woodcut painting, and it's actually on the thumbnail for my YouTube video about gout. Things that cause gout and increase your risk of gout and increase your risk of having a severe gout attack are all in this painting. This guy's overweight, right? He's obese, drinking wine, he's eating fruit, he's eating grains. He's literally, this painting from hundreds of years ago shows you everything to avoid if you don't want to have a gout attack. And those are the things, and I go into much more detail about that. Gout doesn't exist in a population that eats the proper human diet or the Sapien diet. Gout just is not even a known thing. Maybe one person out of 100,000 will just genetically be screwed enough that they'll have gout sometimes. But as far as gout being, 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 50 people having gout, that's from a plant-based diet. That's what that's from. That's from alcohol. That's from being obese, from eating too many grains and too many carbohydrates. That's what sets you up for gout. And I've got a YouTube video about that. Dr. Paul Saladino also has a great YouTube video about gout. There are many people starting to talk about this. Red meat does not cause gout. Everybody listening, repeat after me. It does not cause gout. That is a myth.
Yeah, it's so obvious. It's alcohol, it's fructose, it's stuff like that. And I can see this is what always happens in our society where the people will be doing a million bad things and then they'll blame it on the red meat, right? So if you're eating a super high fructose, high sugar grain diet with a ton of alcohol and then you eat a steak, I mean, maybe that is bad. Maybe you will get a gout flare up because you added that steak, but it's not the steak. It's definitely not the steak. It's all the other trash.
You should have been eating the steak and avoiding all the other stuff. And you're exactly right. People will go to McWendy Kings and they'll get a supersized double cheeseburger and they'll get the supersized fries and the 44-ounce Coca-Cola, but they're going to blame all the health problems they have on the meat and the cheese and the sandwich, and you completely ignore all the other shit that they ate in that diet, and that's asinine. And but the problem is that is the accepted paradigm by millions of people. It's the meat and cheese that's bad in that meal. And so that's what you and I, that's our job. Is we've got to, gently, lovingly slap people around a little bit and say, honey, it ain't the meat and cheese that's causing you to be obese. It's causing you to have gout. It's causing you to have type 2 diabetes. Dr. Neil Bernard, famous for saying that eating saturated fat clogs up your muscle cells, then the glucose can't get in your cells, and that's what causes diabetes. Any doctor who says that is either ignorant or dishonest. And I don't have a thing against Dr. Bernard, but he has to have forgotten his physiology and his biochemistry to even say such an ignorant thing.
Yeah, I commented, I guess it was Sean Baker's post that he should be sued for malpractice at this point. It got a lot of likes. It was funny, my comment, but yeah, it's just a backwards way of looking at it. And even if you could figure out a way to rationalize that, we need to eat the fatty meat. That's the thing that should be in our diet. It kind of comes down to this: the combination is a bad thing. It's like Ted Nyman talks about. A lot of people talk about this. It's the combination, right? That's when we see all the problems when we're eating the high processed foods plus the meat, and it's obvious one needs to go.
Yeah.
It
And I don't agree with that paradigm, but I'm not offended by that paradigm that it's the combination of eating fatty meat plus lots of carbs. And because then I would say, okay, so what if I went and smoked some crack and then ate a ribeye? Would it be the combination of smoking
Yeah,
the
yeah.
crack and the ribeye that caused the problem? Or maybe I should just not smoke the crack. But if you would like to say, I think it's a combination of smoking crack and eating ribeye, that's what caused whatever, I'm okay with that.
Well,
Because you got to stop smoking the crack.
kind of. Yeah, it's more of just a more PC way of saying I know what the problem is. Like I know it's that,
Exactly. And I'm
but then
happy for people to use that. I love Dr. Ted Naiman.
yeah.
Huge respect for him. He's moving the needle. And so I'm not going to fight with him if he says it's the combination of the two, because he's still moving the needle. He's still shifting the paradigm, which is my goal, is for people to understand can't eat all these processed carbs and be healthy. So why would I want to fight with him about that? I'm happy that he's saying things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I think there's some more nuances in there. I learned early. I got into wars with, like I don't know, like some Kevin Bass or some of these people, they're all just balanced Lane Norton types, and they're like, oh, well, technically you can be healthy in like this certain way if you're eating a whole foods, this and that. So I kind of try to be like, okay, technically,
Let me say this about
yeah,
Lane Norton. He's a very intelligent guy. And his recommendations over the past 5 years have already been shifting. And he's already been conceding various points. And I want to make a prediction, and I'm going to make it first on your show. I predict that within 5 to 7 years, Bio Lane will be advocating a ketogenic diet. He is a smart enough guy. I have faith in his intellect that he's bumping around in the dark, just like we all have been, right? Until we discover this. And then we're like, the light comes on. You're like, oh, okay. Now it all makes sense. Literally, it all falls into place. It's kind of like the unifying theory in physics. Keto, low carb, carnivore is kind of the unifying nutritional theory. Once you get it and your paradigm accepts it, then you're like, that makes everything make sense. And Lane's a smart guy. He's going to get here and he will be a keto advocate within 5 to 7 years. That's my prediction.
I love it. Well, he is friends with Dom D'Agostino, so he should be.
He's a smart guy.
He is not. We had a good talk. We had a good podcast. We agreed on a lot. And I agree with you. I think I even use that same term, the unifying theory of nutrition. I'm using that kind of in the film, right? Where it's like kind of the basis of the film is I'm going around studying all types of diets, right? And I'm trying to figure out what is the unifying theory, like, right? Because it's so confusing. So many different dietary strategies out there. You know, you like go in a supermarket, the magazine says one thing, and then the other magazine says the opposite. And the next month, the same magazine says the opposite. And no one has this unifying theory in their head, but all the people in our little world do, right? That's why people are like, why are you guys so zealous about it? It's like, because we figured it out. This is the unifying theory. Yeah, it's like, I get it now. Everything makes sense. Evolution makes sense. Modern science makes sense. Biochemistry makes sense. Epidemiology, you can even make sense of it. Everything lines up when you look this way. So yes, if people are genuinely curious and scientific and smart, which yeah, Lane is, then I think they'll get there. I think he's also operating in this model of bodybuilding type of thing, right? Where you can use carbs and people love to track things and they're all into this and they spend all day doing it, right? Like that's not the normal person. So he's looking at it from a different view and his clients are in that world. But our clients are normal people who just need to lose weight.
Exactly right. And I think that he'll come around. And I think many of the gurus, if they have the best of intentions, if they have an honest heart, and if they're truly looking for the answer and not looking for some little niche to sell $1 million product in, they will eventually come to this conclusion that the proper human diet is a fatty meat heavy diet plus or minus a little veg. That's where we operate best. That's where all of our markers of metabolic disease and inflammation, they all go back either to normal or very, very close to normal. And you just can't get that kind of response long term from any other diet out there.
Well, yeah, let's hit on that for one more second. Is that the HDL to triglyceride ratio is the most important thing. People are like, oh, LDL. And that is best improved. The HDL to triglyceride ratio is best improved on a high fat diet, low in carb.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anybody listening, if your doctor is concerned about your total cholesterol level and wants you to take a statin because of it, you can find a new doctor right then, because that doctor's at least 10, if not 15 years behind on the mainstream reading. I don't even mean that doctor's not in the keto community. That doctor's behind on what just the normal mainstream doctor should know. Now, if your doctor's talking about your LDL's high or your particle size is not right or your particle count, at least that doctor's doing a little bit of reading. I don't agree with them. I still don't think you need a statin. But if your doctor's talking about total cholesterol, you can either wave or shake hands and leave that office and find a new doctor, because they obviously have no interest in even pretending to stay up to date on their reading.
Yeah, that's true. And to close it out, I'm glad that you just like were man enough to admit you're wrong. You know, it sucks. Like you prescribed statins back in the day, right? Like you were on board.
Yeah, I would browbeat a patient if they, and I had patients back in 2003, 2004 who'd be like, they make my muscles ache. I don't want to take that. And I think they probably read some of the very early pioneers in low carb. They'd read enough outside the box. They knew statins might not be good for them. And I would say, well, that's fine. We won't do pravastatin. I'll put you on Zocor. I'll put you on Lipitor, Crestor. And every time they would come, they wouldn't be taking the statin. And I would yell at them and switch them to another statin and say, this one has fewer side effects. This one will be fine. I was that doctor who was pushing statins, and I would get emotional with you. I would get upset with you if you wouldn't take your statin. And so, I have happily admitted many times in public, I was an idiot, fat, miserable, stupid doctor who just blindly believed the party line that I was taught in medical school and then taught with continuing medical education. I didn't think about any of it. I was not educated. I was trained, like a trained dog or a trained monkey. If this, then do that. But that's really not actually what medicine should be.
Well, that's why you wrote a book called Lies My Doctor Told Me. So yeah, that's great. Everyone should check that out. Check out your YouTube channel. Where else? Twitter?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. I'm on all social media. And also the book, Lies My Doctor Told Me, is now available in Audible. So if you're spoiled by listening to podcasts and books and you don't want to read it, you can now listen to it on Audible. And I'm
Awesome.
every social media platform that I know of. I even have a TikTok. I'm trying to reach the teenagers before they develop type 2 diabetes and obesity. I'm trying to reach them and say, hey, the reason your acne is so bad is because of your diet. Go watch my YouTube videos. And I don't know if I'm doing any good on TikTok, but I'm there because that's currently where the teenagers are.
Oh, they don't even know what that one is, but yeah, no, I'm getting it. I mean, we had a guy from, it's like some local high school. He found me through Paul Saldi. I don't know what happened. He came into the clinic. We're getting them young. It's great. They're figuring it out. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up acne too. That's interesting. A lot of people don't realize that, but I'm on board.
Oh, it's huge. You can basically reverse the most severe acne by getting rid of the 3 slow poisons that I talked about earlier. That's going to make 95% of people's acne 95% better.
Well, that's actually what this kid said when he came in to Evolve Healthcare. He was like, yep. All right. Well, awesome stuff. Thanks for coming on. And I guess I'll see you at the next conference, maybe.
Yeah, I'll see you. As soon as Nisha has this baby, we'll be back on the road again. And until then, I'll be making YouTube videos and pissing people off on Twitter, I guess. See you next time.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Come back next week for Dr. Ted Nyman, my hero, my man. He's coming on to talk about his new book coming out on November 1st. In the meantime, please give this podcast a review on iTunes or on the Apple Podcast app. It really helps. Just hit that 5 stars. Check out sapien.org for all the updates and find everything there. And stay happy and healthy.